Welcome to our webinar today about privacy enhancing technologies or privacy enhanced technologies. We'll be talking about the difference as we go, I'm sure. Privacy enabling technologies, whatever you want to call them. So we're going to be exploring benefits and recommendations, and hopefully today we'll make sure that you have a good webinar. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Ralph O'Brien. As I said, I do act as the principal consultant for Europe for TrustArc. And I think I normally start by saying this is my 25th year in data protection and privacy, right? So from 1998 onwards, I've been helping organizations to manage their risk, not only manage their risk, but also make sure that they deliver in accordance with good design strategies and making sure they implement good things in technology that will not only help them, but also help the individuals they serve as well. And I'll pass over to Martin, who I'm sure can introduce himself much better than I can.
How you doing, Ralph? Nice to join you. My name is Martin Gomberg. I'm a senior privacy consultant with TrustArc. By background, I spent some 20 years as a CIO for a global media network. So I feel pretty intimately involved with technology and technology change over time, which makes this an interesting topic for me. I've been a CIO, I've been a CISO, I've been in privacy for a lot of years. So that's roughly the background that I'm going to bring to the table.
And what a wonderful background it is. But what we're going to be talking today is a little bit of an overview of what pets are, what pets aren't perhaps, privacy enhancing technologies as we're going to call them. We're going to be talking about why they're useful, why in particular now, why privacy protection and now beginning to get involved with data-driven decisions as well, and how pets fit in with those good old-fashioned privacy principles that we all know and love. We'll be representing TrustArc today, of course, and TrustArc have got a number of recommendations for how to implement pets as part of a wider privacy program and ultimately help to achieve your goals. So without further ado, we'll jump straight in, and perhaps I'm going to start here today, and I'm going to start looking at the difference between what I'm going to call privacy technology and privacy laws. I think it's interesting when I look at people's backgrounds in data protection world, and I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of lawyers, a lot of legal advisors out there, and I think pets are an interesting topic to talk about before we even talk about what they are, to kind of talk about why they're needed, why they're implemented. And I think what has really changed for me over the 25 years I've been in technology, been in data protection, is scale. Yeah. When I first started 25 years ago, we were using manual records. We were using manual records. We were using good old-fashioned ring binders, and we were looking at collections of 100 bits of paper, 200 bits of paper, 200 files on 400 people, right? And now when I'm dealing with companies, we're talking about a 0.01% error rate, and we're going, well, that's fine, 0.01%. Well, yeah, with 100 people, fine. But when you're looking at 4 billion people on a facial recognition database, with everyone's photograph on it on the globe, suddenly that 0.01% doesn't look quite so good. So I think whilst technology is certainly a problem in terms of privacy, it creates all sorts of opportunities, all sorts of benefits, but also all sorts of risks. And so we have to consider scale as being one of the things that has really changed over the last 25 years. And I often think that we in the data protection community certainly fall behind. We in the data protection community, when we're looking at it as a legal compliance topic, I actually think that's not going to help us because the technology will advance sometimes much quicker than we will. The scale will change much faster than we will. And sometimes I feel that when we look at this from a legal compliance point of view, we end up papering over the cracks, as they say, shutting the door after the horse has bolted. And I see that there's this maturity scale in companies, whereas lower maturity companies look at data protection as this sort of reactive cost. Look at it as something that they're doing because the law says they have to, in such a way that it's going to be detrimental to their business. And when I look at really world-class, world power leading organizations, they don't really look at it as a legal compliance problem. They look at it as a technology design issue, and not really as a problem, but as a benefit, yeah, as implementing good data protection features and functionality within their products and services that empower individuals to manage their data. And that means it kind of becomes a proactive benefit rather than a reactive cost. Martin, I'm not sure if you've got anything to add on that, but you know, I'm sure you've seen similar sorts of things from your experience.
Well, you know, I have a lawnmower guy passing my window right now, so give me a second here. Anyway, you know, I'm 100% in agreement with everything you said, but I would actually step this back a notch and put this into a different kind of perspective. Privacy is a calm and beautiful day at the beach.
We could all do one of them.
Laws are the big kid you bring along, whether or not you like them, so that nobody kicks sand in your face. The tech is your sand chair, your umbrella, your sunscreen, and your pets are the integrated chair with an integrated umbrella and a USB port.
Right.
So we need to understand where this actually fits and what the actual objective is here. The objective is privacy. Our goal is not to have the best tech. Our goal is not to have the best laws. We have to conform with the laws. We have to meet what they require. Our tech needs to do what it needs to do to satisfy our business environment. But these are business cultural issues we're trying to solve. We solve them with tools, and the tools in this case are laws and tech. And that tech has some specializations to it. That's what we're calling PETs. You know, we call these things privacy enhanced technologies by definition. I break them into two classes, privacy enabled and privacy enabling technologies. Privacy enabling technologies are all of these exceptional platforms that are out there. TrustArc, and you know the names. There's a whole bunch of very capable platforms to help you to get to where you need to go. They have a lot of functions and capabilities. These are what I call privacy enabling platforms. We've had privacy tools for a long, long time, and we've had things that we would call PETs, additional functions, the ability to encrypt a spreadsheet, the ability to do this data discovery, all of these things. So we've had this stuff since the 1990s or thereabouts. But privacy enabling platforms bring together all of these functions that will allow you to manage your privacy program better, to approach the problem of addressing your privacy issue. The privacy-enabled technologies, in large part, are technologies that are in part theoretical. They're existing in labs, they're existing in universities, companies are working on them, but you can't buy them, you can't find them, you can't bring them in, you can't test them, you can't purchase them, you can't implement them, you can't integrate, operate, manage, scale. You can't do any of that stuff. These are not there yet. And so I broke them as privacy enabling and privacy enabled as PETs 1 and PETs 2. And this PETs 2 enabled technologies that we're waiting to see, we'll probably never be able to buy. We'll probably never be able to touch them. Some of them will just disappear. Others will be absorbed into these platforms, PETs 1, the TrustArcs of the world, the Amazons of the world. Amazon's already just recently announced in their S3 buckets, encryption by default, native tagging, all of these are PETs. That's what's happened is that Privacy enabled, or PETs 2, has been implemented within a platform that we can now consume. And it's when we can consume these things that they add any value. Because the key thing that Ralph said before is the question of scale. You know, there's about 150 or so privacy laws out there. They all differ in what they require with regard to compliance. The complexity of business has increased. Business thrives on data. The only way to manage this is to manage this at a corporate level, you know, going after the data minimization, not specifically for an application, but for a company. How do I minimize the data that I bring in? How do I maximize the rights that I can protect for the individuals with whom I need to interact? These are the things that we need to do at a company level. And I see PETs 2 becoming part of PETs 1, and we'll absorb them through those platforms. We'll never go to a pet store, and we'll never go to a pet shelter. We'll never be that way. We'll pick up our pets because the platforms that are capable of providing these services to us will become richer, and that's how we'll receive them.
I love that, and I love that differentiation you made between what I'm going to call PETs 2 now, or the future PETs, and PETs 1, because it's interesting that the ICO only yesterday has brought out a new code of practice on pets, and that came with a statement from the ICO here in the UK, our regulator, saying we recommend organisations look at pets over the next 5 years, but their definition of pets is stuff like homomorphic encryption, quantum computing, really sexy technologies that, as Martin said, today you can't buy. That's actually not what I think of when I think of pets. When I think of privacy by design, when I think of privacy enhancing technology, I think of more fundamentally normal technologies. I think of identity and access management. I think of user self-service. I think of individuals that can log into a tool and print out a copy of their own data or make their own rights requests, actually have the ability to understand what they're giving out and what privacy settings they want in place and what privacy settings they don't. So I think it's fascinating that regulators come out and said, oh, consider pets in the 5 years space, as if pets are these futuristic things that are, you know, out of people's current range. Whereas I think of pets very much as the day-to-day things you're going to implement within your product or service or design that's going to enhance your user experience, make sure, and, you know, at the front end and at the back end, make sure you're embedding those principles. We all know those data protection principles: transparency, minimization, retention, purpose specification, security, rights. To me, pets really should be automating those principles as part of the design process to add in cool features and functionality to the products and services we're developing at the moment.
Yeah, you know what? Just as the ICO has put this out to the future, I just read an article posted for the White House. They posted it exactly a year ago. It was June of 22. And basically, they started the article by saying, imagine a future, right? That's their opening line. Imagine a future. They've already told you where they're putting these things out there. Imagine a future where researchers can analyze medical records without accessing anyone's private data. In the future. Cities can share public health information. In the future. Smart infrastructure. In the future. And then they say pets are technologies that will allow researchers, physicians, and others to gain insights. They don't say they do allow, they say they will allow. All of this is being thought of as future. There's a lot of work we need to do now. And the work that we need to do now, privacy enhanced operations. Let's look at our businesses. Let's look at the way in which we run our business, interact with our clients, maintain a level of transparency, minimize the data we take in, handle all of the matters of how we accept consent, the legal basis, and all of it. Let's do that kind of stuff and focus now. And if there are tools that help us to do that better, let's use those now. Because that future that we're waiting for, you know what happens when you wait for the future? Problem changes. Your problem changes, the objectives change, your business changed. That which you were waiting for no longer is applicable to you. So this whole concept of let's wait for the future, there's something out there. There's a lot that's out here now. There's company, I mentioned the Amazon capabilities. Each of the big cloud providers all allow you to encrypt now by default. They're all allowing some aspect of tagging. One company I know does least privilege at scale in the cloud. There's crazy stuff out there that's doing great things that we can bring in now to help us to, to move our privacy programs along. But the key thing is think of it at a corporate level, break down the barriers that are resisting that stuff, and help to enable your operations through the use of good tech now.
That's really good.
That your objective is not the tech. Your objective is the goal, good privacy. Companies struggle with conforming to the laws now.
I also think that people tend to think of them as mutually exclusive. What really changed the game for me was, and I'm sure many people as well, was a lady called Anne Cavoukian in the mid-90s, right? Anne Cavoukian. She was a Canadian privacy commissioner up in Ontario there, and she brought out a report on privacy by design that was just fabulous. And it contained a set of principles that I'm going to throw up on screen for you now. And it really changed the way, because I was one of those people perhaps who not slipped into being a no person exactly, but I was looking at data protection as, oh my God, you can't do that. Oh my God, the law, we're not complying with the law. I need to make sure that you comply with the law or else we can't do it. And I think from a business perspective, that's actually quite damaging. It's quite damaging to the people in the business, and you end up being sidestepped as a data protection professional because they're like, oh, don't talk to that person. That person will say no. Right? If they're just going to be the problem, we'll just get out of their way. We'll sidestep them. And so what you have to become, I think, is not part of the problem, but part of the solution. Rather than just saying no, you have to have a privacy playbook in your pocket, right? You have to have a set of if X, then Y. Not just here's the problem, but here's the solution. And it was her principles where she said, look, in order to do this right, we've got to be not reactive, not after the fact. It's very difficult to change some software once it's out there and it's implemented and people are using it and there's personal data already being in use and it's going everywhere. So we need to be in there as early as we can in the design stage. Messing around with the system requirements, adding in data protection, not that stops functions and features, but that is functions and features. Data minimization, transparency, giving people control over their data, making sure the data is accurate, data input validation. These are, reducing free text fields. These are all features, functionality. So being proactive, not reactive, preventative, not remedial, as she said. And then moving privacy into the default setting, because, quite often you see that organizations very cleverly in some cases give you really complex privacy settings that, and as soon as you move one thing to open, everything's open and you've got to go through, and they rely on user fatigue to try and get you to almost trick you, almost deceptive design patterns. So moving privacy into the default setting, whereas if you do nothing, everything's private and it'd be up to you how to open it. Embedding it into the design, and that to me operationally means getting to know your IT teams, getting to know your product teams, getting to know your vendor management teams. You don't want to hear about things late. You want to be in there from day one, generating good ideas that will help them to implement technology rather than later on find out about it when it's too late. That probably means implementing and ending up talking to your security teams, getting to know the data lifecycle, getting to not only trust but verify, making sure that you've got visibility not only of your data flows, but also of your third parties, your vendors, your systems, where that data ends up, if they're doing their part of the party. And what we sometimes forget with data is we forget that we humans are fuzzy creatures, right? We humans don't fit neatly into boxes, and we sometimes, oh, we'll move that spreadsheet, but we forget that that spreadsheet is someone's hopes and dreams and loves and hates and desires. So actually, the one thing I'd change about Anne Cavoukian's principles is that respect for user privacy, putting the individual, the human, back at the center. I'd put that as principle 1 rather than principle 7, right? Don't forget the human, put the human back at the center. And I think we're all, when we're acting with our corporate hat on, I think we're all guilty of sometimes putting the needs of the business first, or I don't think they're mutually exclusive, by the way. But I think sometimes we're very prone to slipping into that versus mindset. And I think if we're going to change and start looking at privacy enhancing technology in the design process, I think we need to start by looking at ourselves.
Yeah, that's put beautifully. Privacy is a cultural matter. It's a matter of ethics. It's a matter of how we treat people. It's, as I put to before, it's do unto others as we would have others do unto us. That's where we want to get. But, as I was saying before, companies struggle with, particularly large companies that have to deal with a lot of laws. They struggle with, how do I keep pace with all of these changing laws, variable laws? The laws look different. They have different time frames, expectations, all of this stuff. They don't struggle with privacy per se, because we don't have the time to put into it. We're focused on the laws and the technologies. We're focused on the tools. We're not focused on the problem. The more pets can be engaged in the right way so that they scale and at a corporate level reduce the problem, they'll be effective. If we're just thinking in terms of pets as those things being done in the laboratories and the universities and all of the stuff with that, and great white papers, and some of them will be successful. I just read another blog right before the session that said that there's great pets out there. Most will fail. And that's true, that we don't have a way to find them. We don't have a way to consume them, unless they get absorbed into the other platforms. But it really comes down to, it's when pets can approach the problem, the objective. The objective is, how can I get better privacy? And you know what the rules are. It's, define your objective, define the risk to the objectives, define the controls that address the risks, test your controls, see if they're successful, and then look at whether or not your objective has been met. That's what we do in IT. That's our world. Those 5 things, that's governance. These, the technologies, these controls, that's right there in the middle. That's after you have defined your objectives and figured out what your risks. We need to be looking at how well our objectives are being met, our risks mitigated by these controls, these pets that we're bringing into our environment. How well is that working? And the more that they can address our objectives and do it in a meaningful way so that as a company we benefit, overall, those things will be successful. Again, I don't believe personally that we'll find too many people going out and finding a shrink-wrapped pet. That won't happen. What we will find is companies that have absorbed this into the tools that they provide to us so that we can do a better job. And
yeah, I totally agree. And I think some of those pets are, as you say, you can look to the future, you can look to your pets too, or you can look at what you're doing now. And to me, it's about getting back into the design process and coming up with products and solutions and techniques and tools that, you know, proactively give you that win-win, proactively give you, you know, a good user experience because they've got more control, and but also a good business experience because at the end of the day, you've got, you know, a better data set on the outside. So I think you can look at this from almost a back-end, front-end way. Yeah, and I was taught 8 words. I was taught 8 words. You know, I've worked a lot with R. Jason Cronk and the Operational Institute of Privacy by Design. I'm very privileged to sit on a couple of their committees, and they tend to use 8 words, and I think those 8 words are really useful. They tend to say there's 4 things you can do on the sort of the process end, if you like, 4 things you can do for the user, if you like, and there's 4 things you can do at the back end to the data. So to the user, they talk about, well, informing, obviously, transparency. Transparency is a pet in itself because you have individuals going in with, you know, an interesting knowledge and understanding of what's going to go on and what powers they have. So, you know, decent UX, decent user experience has got to be key there. Also, good controls. So having some sort of privacy dashboard, right, or data protection controls whereby the individual has real and meaningful choices. Yeah, things they can do with their data. I do want marketing. I don't want marketing. I want an email once a month. I want an email once a week. I do want it about this. I don't want it about this. I do want these people to see my data. I don't want these people to see my data. Real meaningful choices. Then there's the ability for us to demonstrate. So, you know, that means perhaps badges, certification, right? And enforcement when it all goes wrong. The example I tend to use, I've got a good example I use in a sharing economy website where we're trying to stamp out racial discrimination. And so what happens is you say, okay, well, how do we inform people? Well, we say, do not discriminate. We have good policy. We have controls whereby an individual can choose what level of information to give out to themselves. Do we want to their profile picture given out? Do we want their name given out? Or are we going to use pseudonyms, for example? How do we demonstrate compliance? Well, we give people who don't discriminate, or, you know, a higher ranking or a badge or a star on their profile. And how do we enforce? Well, if we find that people do discriminate, they're gone, right? So enforcement, that's on the process user side. And then we could look at the back end on the data side. Well, you know, we could minimize the amount of data we collect. Do we need to collect ethnicity or race data, either directly by asking the question or indirectly through name, photograph? How do we separate out our different user groups? So good access control, good authentication. Do we give a separate user interface to the person who wants to buy something and the person who's buying it? You know, so we see different information. The fact that I can see stuff about myself doesn't mean that the other party needs to. How do we hide? You know, can we give people pseudonyms, or can we encrypt? Can we find ways where we minimize the data that not that we collect, but that we show to the other person? Or could we even ask people to make choices not on an individual level, on a group level? You know, can we aggregate rather than saying yes or no, I approve this person? We can say yes or no, I approve a person who fits into these categories. So we give them almost allowable discrimination. You know, it's like on Airbnb. You might say, well, my room can only fit 3 people, so I only want people who are 3 people or less. You know, I want non-smokers, people without pets. So I think actually looking at a process-orientated strategy, a front-end strategy, and a back-end strategy for any new product or service you could design, I think you can use just these simple 8 words to be able to come up with good control, whereby you can start to minimize the risk of harm to individuals, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, this is wonderfully put. I love the simplicity of it. And you know what? At a corporate level, if you had to present to your senior management what your plan is with regard to approaching privacy, whether it included the implementation of pets, whether it included the purchase of a platform, what? Companies and executives are used to looking at a presentation in this fashion. We do that for our financials. We do this for all of our corporate reporting. We use tools that lay things out in a very simple way, and we can talk to our objectives and our controls and the successes against them and all of that using these kinds of terms. So I like this a lot. I think that's a very good approach to handling it.
So then we've got these ideas, we've got these privacy playbooks, if you like. I think common solutions to common problems, right? Everybody knows what a privacy notice looks like. Everybody knows what good access control looks like. Everybody knows what, a good user interface looks like. But then how do we operationalize it? And, you said earlier, I think people, process, and technology is always your answer, right? People, process, and technology. So, it's a real step change from an organization. Instead of looking at data protection as a sort of a legal compliance problem, how do we move them from a legal compliance problem to a technology design solution? Yeah, how do we move ourselves perhaps from lawyers and people who look at compliance after the fact to designers? How do we change ourselves from blockers to builders, right? How do we, my good friend of mine, Stuart Room, used to be the head of privacy at PwC here in London. He often said, well, we're all on a journey to code. It was his expression, right? We need to start switching on and say, if software is the problem, then software might also be the answer. And we have to all become not just privacy lawyers and privacy operationalists, but privacy technologists, perhaps, people who understand and have in our back pockets turnkey solutions to the common problems that we find. Now, we talked about PETs 2 being over the hill, but what can we do today? Yeah, what can we do today? What common sense strategies and solutions do we need to understand today in order to deliver good privacy design in the systems and solutions that we're involved in?
Yeah, and I think what we're going to find is even amongst the PETs 2 that we're waiting to see come our way, some of that stuff is going to be miraculous game changers. Some of that stuff, as it gets pulled into PETs 1 so that we can consume it, is going to make a significant difference in our lives, in our companies, and it's going to help us to address these problems more holistically and organically, not just an application at a time, but a culture at a time. We have to learn. We don't need so much data. If we do collect it, we don't need to hold so much data. If we do hold it, we don't need to hold it for quite so long. These are mindset changes that need to happen in a company. And if these technologies help us to get closer to that, all the better. Then there'll be the remaining ones that are PETs, which are pretty esoteric, theoretical stuff. And,
is that what PET stands for? Pretty esoteric theoretical.
Pretty esoteric theoretical stuff. Much of it will be that. So we can't focus on that. That's the stuff that's tomorrow. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it won't appear at all. We don't care. Let's get the stuff that's working now. Let's work with the companies that are able to leapfrog the others by implementing some of these things to take us forward. And that's how you gauge a good company. It's are they moving us forward? If they're not, bet your dog and go on.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're right in that we start off with people, isn't it? We've got to change mindset, right? We've got to change mindset of the way they look at data protection and privacy from something that stops them because it's a legal compliance issue to something that's going to enable them because it's a design issue. And that is a real step change in thinking. That's going to need management commitment behind it, buy-in, training, and we're going to have to change our involvement, I think. If we can get in much earlier in the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, with the security teams who are probably already in there early when it's looking at a new project, a new system, a new development, speaking to project managers, the vendor managements, taking on new suppliers and third parties, getting in early and using the interventions. Nobody likes a new intervention by privacy, so chances are, as I said, your security divisions might already be there having those conversations early and proactive. So I always say to my privacy teams, use those and say it's not security, it's information governance. Let's get in there early and let's start talking about data from the earliest possible time, rather than having a system dumped on you 6 months later and said do a DPIA on it it's a bit late then, right? So that also means as technologists, we have to understand the technology, AI and machine learning and, access control and encryption and stuff that privacy lawyers might never looked at. That's a security thing. That's an IT thing. I think we're going to have to upskill ourselves to make sure that, these new systems we can look at and also understand the risk of our legacy systems. The stuff that we've got that didn't comply because it wasn't designed in a privacy enhanced way. So, moving through that people, process, and technology, I think is a journey where we need to start looking at ourselves first, right?
Yeah. And, our audience is probably in large part attorneys and developers that are interested in taking the next steps into pets. But if we have CISOs or CIOs who are looking in, your role in this is to make a statement with clear vocabulary, and that is, this stuff is important to me. It's important to me personally. It's important to our brand. And if you make that statement and people hear that statement, the barriers to acceptance of these things will fall down. The ability to move these things through your organization will improve. It comes with a statement of leadership that needs to be made so that these investments can happen and the efforts take place. That's where your success will come from. Can't sit back on this. You need to lead on this.
Change comes from the top, as you say. Change comes from the top. Yeah, it always impresses me how we're starting to see it now a lot in adverts. So, I was looking at the television the other day and I saw, I think, of both WhatsApp and Apple, just as examples. They both had taken television adverts out that were like, but they weren't like, we're a good messaging platform. It was, we're private and secure, right? It wasn't, we have a good mobile phone brick. we have a good camera. We have got good storage. We have a good screen. It was, we'll keep you safe. Privacy is important to us and important to you. And I thought that was a fascinating marketing spend, because what that is, that's a company not only recognizing that privacy enhancing techniques is good for them as a company, but it's also what their user base is shopping for, right? You don't spend money on marketing that sort of message unless you've got a customer base you think will buy it, right? And I think that's fascinating when you're marketing a product like a phone. What is a phone? It's a camera, it's a screen, it's some storage, it's a faster processor. But they didn't advertise any of that. They said, no, come to us, we'll keep you safe. And I think privacy and data protection as a competitive advantage, as a win-win rather than a win-lose, is where we have to start. So getting those statements of commitment, like you said, from the management, from a marketing, as a brand, and then being able to follow them up with meaningful product features, meaningful questions that we ask to our vendors before we buy and take on new products and services. Because at the moment we often think of what they call functional and non-functional requirements, right? So we often think, oh, will this accounting software give me the right answer when you add up the digits, right? We don't often say, will this accounting software give me good controls to protect user privacy? Will this accounting software allow me to log in and log out and separate out and give me real choices as to what I can and can't do? And I think when we start asking those questions on the input, we'll all be in a much better place. So I think we're coming towards the end of our time now. So if people have got any questions, please do throw them into our question window. And I can see we've got a couple here that have already come in. The first one I've got in here, question for Martin, I think I've done enough talking. Question for Martin here, it's about, you keep mentioning PETs 2. Could you give us an example of a PETs 2 and where you might have seen it implemented, or are they too far away to be implemented yet? Can you give us some example of a PETs 2, as you call it?
Well, there are a lot of, when I talk about PETs 1, I talk about the platforms, the names that exist today. There's a lot of technology that's going out in some form or another to anonymize communications, shared false accounts, obfuscation stuff, synthetic data that's AI generated, the homomorphic encryption. These are a lot of these types of things. Now, to be honest, some of these things, although they sound like they're still coming, we've used them for a lot of years. In the past, we used steganography to embed streams of text hidden inside the back of an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, we used obfuscation. We'd simply change the color of text to white on a white background. So, I mean, these things are not necessarily new concepts. They're new in how we're applying them to privacy and how we're thinking about that stuff. Sure. But there's a lot of stuff that's zero knowledge proof, very powerful kinds of stuff, because here, these are techniques for being able to authenticate without giving away information. These are some of the kinds of things that I think coming our way, much of which will appear as functionality within PETs 1 platforms, but some of it will simply prove to be, either unnecessary because we've moved on, or not as effective as other things that have come out to replace them.
You can't have quantum encryption unless you've got quantum computers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that answers
that's
the
a really good question. Thank you for that question. That's a really good one. So, yeah, I think it's true. There are a lot of very cool new technologies out there. Martin's just mentioned homomorphic encryption, quantum computing, differential privacy, synthetic data. All of these are very cool buzzwords. Using AI in a very cool way. But ultimately, I don't think as privacy professionals, you're used to be looking at things on a principle base. And therefore, I think, as Martin says, some of these ideas are as old as time. Encryption was around in the Roman times, right? The military for using it since the Babylonians. So, ultimately, it's the technology may have changed the scale, but I think some of our core principles remain the same. I go back to those old words, minimize, obfuscate, hide, aggregate, inform, control, demonstrate, enforce. Those 8 words, perhaps the most useful thing I ever learned when I was looking at applying that. For me, and this is going to answer another question that's just come in as well, it's about getting in early. It's about doing some form of DPIA on a new product or new solution or a new process that you want to achieve that involves personal data, and not just using that as a rubber stamping process. It's coming up with meaningful risk recommendations. How can this product harm somebody, and what controls are we going to introduce to minimize that harm? That's what a PET really is to me. It's just a set of controls that minimizes harm to individuals, albeit in the technology stack.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be blinded by PETs. They're a next step technology. We've taken a lot of steps to get here. We're going to be taking a lot of steps past this PETs definition. We want to not be blinded by its capabilities. We need to understand them, see where they fit, see if we can integrate them into our businesses, see whether or not our business can absorb them. Does it look like and work like other things that we use? Things like that. These are important questions. And also be sure that, we're not misled. We know about AI and hallucinations. You can be misled by the niceness of the technology. We want to be careful about that. I love one concept about the PETs 2 kinds of things that I think about is I see great things possible once the technology begins to understand its own environment and be able to make changes and decisions within it. If you have a thumb drive and the thumb drive can encrypt private data, when it senses private data before it transmits, That's great. We have technologies out there that are very close to that now.
I mean, we're already seeing it in things like 365 Compliance Center that will do things like, oh, it looks like the document you're uploading contains a credit card statement. So we're going to recognize that credit card number. We're not going to store it here. We're going to store it in a different place, and we're going to encrypt it.
So even if these are pets too, they will emerge. They have emerged. They will be part of the stuff that we use, and they'll make our lives better. And you know, none of this stuff, no technology is going to solve the problem of privacy, because privacy is not a technology problem. It's a business and cultural. But they'll make it better. And to the extent we can find the right technologies to make things better and integrate them into our lives will be better.
Oh, well, I think that's perfect words to finish on. Life can be better when we find the right technologies and integrate them into our lives. There you go. And I think on those words of wisdom, thank you very much, Martin, for spending this day with me. It's been a pleasure, as always, to do a webinar with you. And thank you, those people who have been in attendance today, those people who asked questions. And please stay tuned to TrustArc, and we'll let you know of other interesting webinars that might be coming up in the future.